Shalom, Yahweh Shem Ashah Barakatam, Yahweh Shemar Alta by Shem Yahweh Shai. I am Priest and Officer Gabar Amath, ISUPK, Connecticut. Your ISUPK started out of 1 West, 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under commanding General Yohana. Since 1969, we've been teaching the so-called blacks, so-called Hispanics, so-called Native Indians, their true culture and heritage, that we are the 12 tribes of Israel, also known as in the Bible, the Israelites. All right, and that our oppressor, whom is the oppressor all over the planet, all right, is the devil, which means deceiver. The Bible speaks of. All right. Today we're going to go over remembrance. We are the chosen people of God, right? And according to America, we are to forget what has happened to us over the years, even more recently, right? They want us to forget slavery. They want us to remember 9/11. They want us to remember 9/11. They want to keep it in the forefront. They want to keep it like frontlets over your eyes. You know what I'm saying? They want you to constantly see it, constantly hear it, constantly think about it. All right? But Salakia, let me finish. Since 1969, the UPK, the ISUPK has been teaching, all right, that blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians are God's chosen people, the 12 tribes of Israel, all right, and that our oppressor is the devil the Bible speaks of, okay? We are under commanding General Yohana, and he has kept this truth alive, and we are able, even in remembrance, he's kept it in remembrance. So important, right? Now, just bear with me while I post into the chat the attendance sheet. Salakia. Just bear with me. I am Priest and Officer Gabar Amath, ISUPK, Connecticut. Yeah. Salakia. Remember to like, share, subscribe. Alayasha, Yahawada, Shalom. Just bear with me. Just got to put some things in the chat. The attendance sheet in English is on there. Again, sign in. Don't just watch through the window and don't sign in, man. Sign in. All right, be seen, so that you can get your Hebrew name. Do after your 90 days, you get your Hebrew name. All right, and other benefits, but you got to be in here to get that, to receive those things, and you got to be seen. You can't be hiding come into the class. Sign in. And whenever you sign in, also put in the chat where you're hailing from. All right. It's important. It's important that our people start to live on the grid. Okay. Many times we are under the radar, trying to be hidden, and we can't live like that forever, man. Can't live like cockroaches. Can't be scattering all over the place all the time. All right. The Bible says, "Let your light shine before men." So let's do that. All right. Just bear with me one more. Let me just get this onto Facebook. Salakia, onto YouTube. Shalom, Labab Anyamyan. Shalom, Yapa Shayara. All right, let's get started. Let's continue, I should say. Now, I have pulled a video to do some explaining as well, but also to critique the commentary. All rights reserved. All right, this is for teaching purposes only. Teaching purposes only. All right, all rights reserved. Let me see. This is my first time doing this, so bear with me. I'm going to share the screen. Salakia, Yapashayara, can y'all see that? Can y'all see that on the screen? Okay, let's see. Okay. How about now? Just give it a few seconds. How about now? You can see it now, right? All right. All right, let's give this a listen. And we're going to critique it. We're going to listen to what they have to say about critical race theory. Now, we're supposed to remember, right? We're supposed to be remembering. Salakia. Salakia. All right, all right, all right. We're going to get the hang of this. Salakia. We're supposed to be remembering 9/11, yes, right? 9/11 on Saturday, Salakia. We're supposed to remember that, right? They want us, I mean, there's all around Connecticut, because I'm in Connecticut, they had all types of memorial services where the fire department, police department, and different organizations came out in public places and parks and private places as well, and they put into remembrance 9/11 and those that were lost in 9/11 and those that had the families that suffered, right? They wanted to remember those families that suffered in 9/11. Well, let me ask you a question, all right? Who's going to remember the Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian if we don't remember ourselves? Do you see how our oppressor makes it a point to have a Memorial Day? Huh? A Labor Day to remember the fact that you're working? All these different holidays and President's Days and this day and that day, and they make everything a so-called holiday, right? But they don't remember the holy days of the Bible. All right, they don't remember that. Now, I grew up in West Hartford, and in West Hartford, they actually did give the students off the high holy days that are in the Bible, but under the guise of Jewish holidays. They called it Rosh Hashanah. They called it by the by the Yiddish. Okay, and many of the holidays were taken off, including they even added in Three Kings Day when I was in high school in the 90s. They added in Three Kings Day because so many Hispanic or so-called Puerto Ricans were in the school system and wouldn't come to school anyway. So they said, we'll figure get about all the rest of the kids off. All right. Now, Yapasha Ira, I need you to read for me, please. Sulakia. Let's give this a listen while she gets herself together. And hear what it has to say. Let's see. Let's see. Oh.
So, Russell, thanks for joining us. I think a lot of people would have seen these sort of controversial headlines of, people pulling their kids out of really expensive private schools because they don't like critical race theory being taught. But I think a lot of people don't know what critical race theory is. And as I understand it, for it, there even I guess the intellectuals are sort of arguing about what exactly it means. But give us like the basic sort of building blocks. Explain what critical race theory is, and then tell us where this legislation is being introduced to block it from being taught in schools.
Now let's stop there. All right. This critical race theory, all right, is something that has definitely been in the headlines as of late. Okay, and he's going to go into explaining what it is. Again, all rights reserved for teaching purposes only. All right, for teaching and critiquing purposes only. For teaching purposes only. Okay, again, we're told to forget our bad times. But America always wants to throw in everybody's face the bad times which so-called build it. Well, guess what? The so-called Native American, so-called Negro, so-called Hispanic built America. When the so-called Chinese man or Asian man wanted recognition for the trials and tribulations and violence against them and hate against them, guess what they did? They built an organization and funded it, right? And asked for money for it so that they have lawyers to fight against their enemies, the ones who want them to forget, the ones who, okay, which, again, where do we have this? We only have this in the ISUPK under Commanding General Yohana. All right? Through him we shall remember. Yapashaira. Give me Psalm 77:11. Salaki Tawana. Psalm 77:11.
The book of Psalms, chapter 77, verse 11.
Uh-huh.
I will remember the works of the Most High.
Now, this is the Bible we're reading, right? These are the words of Gabar mouth. These are the words of the Lord, right? And the prophets. Read that again.
I will remember the works of the Most High.
I will remember the works of the Most High. Okay, read, give me Jude 1 and 5. What are some of the works of the Most High? Bringing us out of Egypt was a work of the Most High. Christ coming on the earth, right, was a work of the Most High. You understand? The commandments and the covenant is a work of the Most High. We must remember these things in order for us to be right with the Most High. In order, Jude 1 and 5, in order for us to be where we're supposed to be because the Most High made us. He's our creator. You understand? But our oppressor wants us to forget the Bible. He'll use the Bible, build his kingdom up, and secretly have it everywhere in his house, right? And then urge the Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian to forget. And how does he do it? He does it by MTV Awards, BET Awards, posting up our people as so-called stars so that we're always distracted with those things, right? And generation after generation, we forget more and more and more, right? Read.
I will therefore put you in remembrance.
Nice and loud.
I will therefore put you in remembrance.
I will therefore put you in remembrance. Start at 1.
Jude, the servant of Yahushua Hamashiach, and brother of James, to them that are sanctified by the Most High, the Father.
To them that are saved by the Most High, go ahead.
And preserved in Yahushua Hamashiach. And
preserved in the King Christ, go ahead.
And called, mercy unto you.
And called, which is what the ISUPK is. We've all been called to the duty of the Most High and our King Christ. Go ahead.
And peace.
And peace to us. Why? Because we urge remembrance. Keep going.
And love.
And love. And what is love according to the commandments? According to the Bible? Love is following the commandments. Okay? You have to put those commandments in remembrance as well. Because that is the covenant, right? The covenant is, do as I say, hearken unto me. Follow the commandments, the things that I told you to do, and you'll be blessed. If not, you'll be cursed. Keep going.
Be multiplied.
And through the blessing, we will multiply. Go ahead.
Be loved. When I gave all diligence to write unto you of the common salvation.
Salakia. Read that again.
Beloved, when I gave all diligence to write unto you of the common salvation. It was needful for me to write unto you.
And where did he write it? He wrote it in the Bible. Beloved. Read that again.
Okay. Beloved, when I gave all...
Isn't writing something down a way to remember it? Yapa Shaira? Don't you read a book because it's a record of something? Yet we have to remember 9/11. We have to remember the oppressed people, desperate, flying planes into a building, right? Out of desperation. In order to kill and to make an example, we have to remember that. But every day we see Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians shot in the street. We have a record of that visually and audibly, right? We have books on slavery. We have books by Harriet Beecher Stowe, by Mark Twain. Guess where they lived? In Connecticut, right here in Hartford, Connecticut. 10 minutes away, you can go to take a tour of both their homes. You can see how they lived. They both wrote about the atrocities of slavery. Was it a fiction? No, it was real. But they want us to forget. Now let's listen to some more. Let's listen to some more. Salakia.
Well, critical race theory is a framework that was developed in the 1970s by legal scholars that argues white supremacy maintains power through the law and other legal systems. The theory says that racism is a systemic problem that goes back to the nation's foundation. If you look at slavery, the African Americans were listed in the Constitution as 3/5 a person. If you look at the Declaration of Independence, the word savage was used numerous times to describe Native Americans. So the theory maintains that our legal system, our systemic creation, is rooted in racism and therefore it needs to be attacked. That racism does not come from individuals, it comes from the system. What you're seeing now, after a lot of focus groups by conservatives, is an attack on critical race theory in schools, in lessons, any traces that they have as the nation becomes more diverse and there's push for more ethnic studies, more Black studies, more Latino studies, that these conservatives want that out of schools. We see bills introduced at federal level in at least 9 states across the country, even a movement to attack critical race theory at a school board level. And conservatives are really attacking this idea, even if folks don't agree or even have a debate of what the concept means. This comes as parents are asking for more diverse curriculum. There is a push to discuss slavery and Native American removal across the country in our nation's school lessons. And so the reaction is to, against critical race theory, is to take discussions about racism out of schools.
Now, let me say something here, okay? Really? Do you know our American Indian or indigenous American brothers and sisters are barely spoken about anymore? They're barely spoken about. This is their land. They were here first. They all can lay claim to every inch of it. And very rarely, now when I was younger, they were talked about, but talked about as savages, right? I'm in my 40s. As my daughter has grown, and she's 18, right? As my daughter has grown, she didn't hear nearly as much about the indigenous American or the American Indian as I did. And her own mother is indigenous American. You understand? And generation after generation, and it's definitely a planned thing, right? Less is said about the people who built this country, who this country is founded upon. Let me tell you something. The American government, much of the Constitution and how it's written, right, comes after so-called Native American rules of government. Much of what was written in the Constitution and much of what the laws are came out of the nations that existed here already, because there was already a form of government in America, right? The same way the colonizers were taught to hunt, to fish, to keep warm in the winter, to cool themselves in the summer, to read different signs that would tell them how their crops were going to do. All those things were taught, as well as a form of government that was better than the form of government they came here with. It was more orderly. And again, remember, the American so-called Indian, right? The so-called American Indian is an Israelite. So much of, if not all, of what they were governing with was based on biblical knowledge. You understand? These are things that I learned that in school when I was younger, but my daughter never learned that. And again, she's 18. She never learned that. I learned in school. I forget the name. The What is the name? I want to say Lakota Nation. I want to say that, but I'm not going to say it for sure. But there was a nation that had longhouses that the colonizer would sit in, and actually they would speak in sign. They had sign language. That's it wasn't Helen Keller. Okay, it was already here. Sign language is ancient. It was already here. All right, and they would sign and discuss different issues, and they would have almost like a court system. Okay, and I learned that in school. I learned that in school in up to fifth grade. And over time, it's been lost. The school books that I had are not the same as what's now. Now the school books are very diluted and convoluted. There's not much in there. All right, they breeze over things with no specificity at all. All right, give me 1 Corinthians 11 and 25. Let's hear some more of this.
And I think that's where the debate is going, and it's becoming very intense, especially at the school board level.
So, Russell, you mentioned that the U.S. Constitution refers to enslaved Black people as 3/5 of a human.
Right.
The Declaration of Independence also refers to Native Americans as savages. And lest anyone think that's ancient history, first of all, it's in the two founding documents of this country. Also, you had a former United States senator just a couple of weeks ago saying to a wide audience and refusing to actually apologize or back down from his statements that Native Americans' contribution to American history is, and I'm paraphrasing here, is not important or they're non-existent. So what is the argument? I want to understand when people say that this should not be taught in schools. In your article, you refer to Representative Burgess Owens, who is Black. He's a Utah Republican, and he says this: "Fire them, get rid of them. That ideology is against everything we believe in. We need to fire everyone we can find, and those we will fire."
Now you want to bring the Afghan people into America. Give them refugee status, allow them citizenship for the atrocities that they're suffering under the Taliban, the Taliban, which was created by the CIA. Right? It's a left behind from the 80s, from the Reagan era, from the Bush and Reagan eras, Bush Sr. You want to give them refugee status because you decided to pull out. I guarantee they're going to be able to remember the pain and the suffering of their people in America. Have they built America? Do you know what they built? With the poppy seeds and the plants that create heroin, they've created the heroin epidemic. They helped to create it. America being in Afghanistan has helped create the heroin epidemic that is eating our oppressors' children. But they'll still let them come in. They'll still open their arms and embrace them and allow them to come in and allow them to be here amongst the people. Right? The Japanese are allowed. Let me tell you something. The Chinese and the Japanese have been fighting for thousands of years, right? And then you have the Korean, which is still a mixture of them both, right? And the Chinese and Japanese are cousins, right? They're the children of Lot and his daughters. They're cousins. Throughout history, China has invaded and just tried to decimate and wipe Japan off the face of the earth. And Japan has not let it happen. Do they remember their atrocities? Of course. Yes. But you mean to tell me that you want the children not to learn true history, the history of the enslavement of the Israelite peoples, because again, we are those people. We are the American Indian. We are the West Indian. We are the South American. Okay? Look at all the atrocities that happened in South America to our so-called Hispanic brothers and sisters, man. Look at all those atrocities. Hangings, burnings. They burned cities. Look at the Negro in America. Hanging a Negro up by a tree, cutting off his genitals, cooking it up, or putting it in a jar so you could put it on a mantle in your house so you can remember that day. Right? Flaying the skin from their back, from their backside, from their stomach, from the inner thighs, so you can make shoes because you felt like the skin of a Negro would last longer than any cowhide. And still, they have those shoes on display. And in different school settings, still. But you don't want to put that into remembrance. Because it's a disgusting thing that was done. And our oppressor has more power over the so-called Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian when we are lost in the sauce, when we don't have a recollection of who we are. Read.
Not okay.
Nice and loud.
Not okay. After the same manner, also he took the cup when he had supped, saying.
That's 1 Corinthians 11 and 25.
Not okay.
Go ahead.
This cup is the New Testament in my blood.
Mm-hmm.
This do ye, as oft as ye drink it, in remembrance of me.
Again, all through the Bible, all through this Bible, the Lord wants us to remember everything good and bad that has happened to us, man. Everything. Give me Exodus 12 and 14.
Okay.
New Testament, Old Testament, and Apocrypha, and in between. You understand? So far as he gave us the Bible, I come in the volume of the book. They tried to take out the apocryphal texts, right? And hide them. The Catholic Church took them out to hide them. They didn't want us to remember that. They didn't want us to remember the Greek captivities, how cruel they were to us, how they cut out the tongue of a mother and her 7 sons because of pork. You know what I'm saying? And now you go to Burger King, you go to McDonald's, you go anywhere, and man, bacon is everywhere. Bacon is on every sandwich, and we don't even know better. Many of us don't know better. We're like, man, that bacon makes it taste so much better because it's salty and delicious. Man, listen, we are in a captivity and we need to wake up, man. And guess how you wake up? By remembering who you are. By remembering who you are. That is what's important. That is how you will wake up. By giving remembrance unto the things of old. Read.
Exodus chapter 12, verse 14.
Mm-hmm.
And this day shall be unto you for a memorial. And ye shall keep it a feast to the Most High throughout your generation.
All of our feast days and holidays and holy days, right? All of them are to remember what has happened in the past so that we can continue our culture and our heritage because we are a bloodline of people. We are the bloodline of God's chosen people. We are the Israelites. Read on.
Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever.
By a what?
Ordinance forever.
You're commanded to remember. You're commanded to remember. You're commanded to remember critical race theory, man. 9 states. 9 states don't want you to remember that you were in slavery. They want to teach your children that the Atlantic slave trade was an immigration, voluntary immigration. That's foolishness, man. Is there more on that?
Verse 15.
What does that say?
7 days shall ye eat unleavened bread.
Give me John 14 and 26. Let's get some more on this. Let's get some more.
Later on, we'll figure out a way to get rid of them too. But within that statement, and I haven't watched his entire appearance on Newsmax, what did he say was his actual criticism of this theory? In other words, the things that we just talked about, the way that African Americans were measured by the census at the start of at the founding of this country, the way Native Americans were referred to as savages. Does he disagree with that? Does he not?
Let me tell you something that you might not know. American Indians and the so-called black man in America, so-called, that was brought over on boats, because not all of us were brought on boats, okay? Some of us were already here. They were called Negro by the census. The so-called American Indian, the Gadite, according to the Bible, the Seminole Indian, were called Negroes. Now let your mind work on that for a second. The census called them Negroes. And the census takers, do you know what they were? The census takers were given the status of a sheriff or a sharif, where he had the ability to write down and take liberty in writing whatever he thought was right. Now, they got paid for the census taking. Do you think he and no one was watching him? He didn't have a supervisor over him watching him. So do you think he did the right thing every time? The answer is no. Let's keep listening.
Not think that actually is in those documents?
What he's arguing, as others are, is that there needs to be a return to how we teach civic lessons and history back into the 1950s. After the Korean War, during the Korean War, we had some defectors from the U.S. Army go onto the North Korean side. And so a law was passed to require history in schools that taught patriotism.
Whoa, wait a minute. A law was passed to encourage patriotism. Now, let's keep listening. All rights reserved for teaching purposes only.
Taught nationalism. And so what he's arguing, what a lot of conservatives are arguing, is that we need to return to that, use history as a tool to reinforce patriotism. Unfortunately now, we see history as a different type of subject, a different type of entry level to understand this country. And to understand this country, we must confront our racist and our nationalistic past and how it affects people of color. We just commemorated the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Those people there, the people affected, the survivors, the family of survivors, are Exhibit 1 about what happens with systemic racism after the Black Wall Street.
Let's take that for a second, right? Tulsa, Oklahoma happened, right? And it wasn't talked about at all for a long time, but by the grace of the Lord, man, it came up and it's been a topic of conversation, right? And there wasn't just one Black Wall Street, there were many. Rosewood was another one. Movies have been made about these things. They always release something about them over time, but they never ball them and put them together, because then you see the pattern. All right? But many Wall Streets happened around the US, and many and all of them were quelled with violence. You understand? with violence. And many of those towns that had the Wall Streets, that had the Black excellence, many of them, when you enter the town, when you're driving in, there are signs that say lodge, motor club, Masonic, such and such. Those are signs to let you know we have this place under control. Many places, all over Connecticut, you'll see those things because those are signs to let whomever is coming in know who's in control.
Street was destroyed in Tulsa. There were attempts by Black families to rebuild. They wanted to rebuild and hold the people accountable for murder and this race massacre. But the system itself there in Tulsa prevented them from doing so. They were refused building materials. The system refused to hold those accountable for murder. And there was no accountability, and there hasn't been any accountability for 100 years. People are using the Tulsa race massacre as an example.
And now most of the people that experienced it firsthand are dead. Only a couple are still alive. And their families have suffered because of that, man. Their families have suffered over the 100 years. And there's no recompense for the loss of life, liberty, property. There's no recompense for that. They recompense one woman.
Example of how the system continues to oppress people of color, and what the opponents of critical race theory, or even those that want discussions about racism in schools, are arguing, hey, look, let's just acknowledge this history. Before we can even come to solutions about our present day, you have to acknowledge what happened. And so what right now is the debate, I'm thinking of 1984, of Winston Smith trying to go back into history and rewrite it, that this didn't happen. So what these people are arguing on both sides is a fight over history and the narrative of this country. And that's what this is.
All rights reserved for teaching purposes only.
Is going down to, that this history should not be looked at from a national perspective, but we should look at the facts of what happened from slavery all the way to Native American removal, and that students should know about it and they should debate it.
That's right. Listen, under commanding General Yohana, the truth continues to flow out, man. Like waters, it will flood the earth, man, the truth. All right? This brother here that's speaking is a Latino brother, man. Okay? He's an expert on this. You understand? And I hope more of our brothers and sisters stand up and keep our oppressor from further oppressing us by speaking the truth. Give me, you got John 14:26?
Okay.
Read.
Okay. The book of John, chapter 14, verse 26. But the Comforter, which is the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things, and bring all things to your remembrance.
Read that again. Yes.
But the Comforter, which is the Holy Spirit.
But the Comforter, which is the Holy Spirit, which is that Spirit of Christ and the Most High. Go ahead.
Whom the Father will send in my name.
Whom the Father will send in my name. Go ahead.
He shall teach you all things.
He shall teach you all things. Who is the Word of God? Christ, right? Isn't Christ the Word of God? Go ahead.
And bring all things to your remembrance.
And bring all things to your remembrance, including slavery. You want to remember 9/11 the oppressor, right? Once you remember 9/11, well, then you have to remember every atrocity of blood that you spread. What is that scripture? Build is not a town. Salakia. Let's get that. Habakkuk. Give me Habakkuk 2 and 12, Salakia.
كنادون كان.
Habakkuk 2 and 12. Let's get that. Underneath New York City, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, you know what you have? Mass graves. These places are built on the bones of my people, of the Israelites, man. Built on the bones of men, women, and children. You understand? Read.
But the Most High
No. Habakkuk 2 and 12.
Slack the other one. Woe to him that buildeth a town.
Say it again.
Woe to him.
Woe. Woe. Destruction. To him. Go ahead.
That buildeth a town with blood.
That buildeth a town with blood. Keep going.
Canado can. Establisheth a city by iniquity.
And establishes a city with sin. That's what many of the towns in America were established with, man. You look around, listen, I drive through the town of Bristol. I see buildings that are ancient. I see very old buildings with slate roofs that were there in old style, that is a style that was not the oppressor style of building. These houses are pristine and immaculate. Okay? Pristine and immaculate. And have been there for hundreds of years and are still there. The streets were built around them because when the houses were built, there was nothing but dirt roads or grass. Right? Read that again.
Canado can. Woe to him that buildeth a town with blood.
Woe to him that buildeth a town with blood.
Establisheth a city by iniquity.
And establishes a city by sin, iniquity. Go ahead. Talking.
Behold, it is not of the Most High of hosts that the people shall labor in the very fire, and the people shall weary themselves for very vanity.
Yeah, keep going.
For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Most High.
The earth shall be filled with what?
With the knowledge of the glory of the Most High.
Because they're going to remember that. Because there's nothing new under the sun. All things are going to come into remembrance. Understand? And this Bible is the key to unlocking that. Unlocking the culture, the heritage, the family lineage of the Israelite, of the so-called Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian man, woman, and child. That's what it is, man. Understand? Drop that. Give me Malachi 3 and 16. Malachi 3 and 16. Let's get a little more of this for teaching purposes only.
So it's not just state legislatures that are, introducing these bills. House Republicans introduced a bill to ban federal funding for teaching critical race theory. Sometimes I wondered how organic these sort of things are, because I can't imagine that there are bucket loads of federal money that's going in.
Now check this out. All three of the individuals on the screen are Israelites. No, you know what? Let me not even assume. Salakia. I take that back. I'm not even going to assume because I don't know who their father is. But all three pass as so-called blacks or Hispanic. The gentleman on top left, the young lady on the bottom, they live their lives as so-called black. I've seen other interviews and stuff and done with them, and they've grew up thinking that they were black. Mixed, but black. The brother here, Rancho, also is so-called Hispanic, right? Or lives his life as a so-called Hispanic. Let's continue.
Into this. But they held a news conference last month. I want to play some of what they said.
Critical race theory is a divisive ideology that threatens to poison the American psyche. All who love freedom and revere the foundational principles of our constitutional republic have a duty to inform themselves of the origins and thought underlying this dangerous ideology and to oppose it openly and robustly.
So here's this thing about critical race theory, right? This sort of academic study, this other way of looking at history.
For teaching purposes only.
Like I mentioned, academics argue back and forth about what goes into that definition and what doesn't. And then there is how it's interpreted within the schools, what schools are doing. And I got to tell you, I don't know how you just sort of introduce a bill that bans critical race theory without wiping out any conversation about race. And I would think even people who are pushing patriotism would acknowledge that racism is something that is, not good and should be discussed. I'm just sort of confused as to what the lawmakers are hoping to accomplish with these bans.
Well, it looks like this was focus group by various conservatives, that it's easier to say let's ban critical race theory, which is an esoteric term for most folks, than saying let's ban the discussion about systemic racism in our schools. So to use those terms, critical race theory, it sounds...
Let me say this too. You think banning something is going to keep children who make fun of each other for all types of reasons? Do you think it's really going to do anything? Realistically? You have nations of people coming to America, embracing their culture and bringing their cultures here. And what's going to happen to what the American culture is eventually is it's going to be a culture of nothing. A culture of nothing. A misogynist grouping of just vanity and emptiness. You understand? Already it's happening. The rich history and knowledge of the so-called American Indian is lost. You can only read it in the book. And soon those books will be priced out of range of the normal citizen or individual so that eventually they'll be forgotten. And you want to forget the contribution of the so-called Black or Negro man to America, building the original builders of the railroad? They want to say that the Chinese man built the railroad. No, that's not true. The so-called Black man built the railroad, built bridges, right? Built the first cars, put up the first telephone poles and lines and wiring. You understand? We did that. You understand? The tailors of the time were so-called Negroes. When you look at old pictures, do you see us wearing suit coats and jackets? Our women are wearing bodices. Who made those? They made them themselves. They had the skills to make those things. Our women dressed impeccably, man. And our men, even though the clothes became tattered over time, our men looked sharp too, man. Our men were sharp too. Because when we stepped out, we stepped out. Even when it comes to the zoot suit era, that was the Chicano and the American, so-called American Indian, or the so-called Spanish American, so-called, right? Taking something and giving it their own flair. And when you watch old cartoons, you see it. You see them swinging pocket watches. That was the flavor they put on the culture. Just like now, when you see fitteds, snapbacks, when you see jersey wearing, you know what I'm saying? Anything you see is contributed by God's chosen people. If it's in righteousness, definitely. Now there are things that we contribute in unrighteousness as well, of course. But most of everything is contributed by us. You understand? When you see interest in sports over a long period of time, for any team or whatever the case is, who is it? Who is it? Who is it that's leading that trend? But yet you want to take away the struggle and the painful times of that same people, which help create those trends. It's disgusting. Let's hear a little more.
Academic, it sounds distant, it sounds elitist, and it polls well. But it seems like this is an organized effort, not just at the federal level, but at the school board level. You have a group that started a super PAC or a PAC to train conservatives at a school board level to attack critical race theory. Just recently, we had a very heated discussion in a school board in Missouri where
again, for teaching purposes only,
parents gathered, and there was obviously a division between the parents of color and white parents. In one case, an Asian American woman spoke out and said, "I've been affected by racism. This is why I think we should have diversity in schools." And behind her, there was a white woman shaking her head and said, "No, you haven't. No, you haven't." So we can't even have an agreement on how people of color should define their own past, much less an academic past.
Now that's heavy right there. We're not even allowed to define our own past. That is very true. That is very true. Shouldn't every culture be allowed to define and to speak about and to either praise or vilify their past as they see fit, as it affected them? Shouldn't they have a say on what they went through as a people, as an individual first, and then as a people over time, right? We're not even allowed that, man, in America. It's disgusting. It's not right. And as truth comes out more, there's going to be more and more discussion about these things, and the truth will prevail, most definitely. You know what I'm saying? That's my time. I am Priest and Officer Gabar Math, ISUPK, Connecticut. We are ISUPK, started out of 1 West, 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under Commanding General Yohana. Since 1969, we've been teaching the so-called Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians their true culture and history as it pertains to the Bible, true history, and archaeology, that the so-called Black, Hispanic, and Native Indian is God's chosen people, called the Israelites, and the oppressor is the devil that the Bible speaks of. Until next class, shalom.
Shalom.